Hi there, it's Lerald, and today I'm going to talk about this week's update to the patch 10.2 PTR. This happened earlier today, although by the time I have this video out, it'll basically be last night. But either way, there really was only one set of changes that happened here, and that was a pretty comprehensive overhaul to the entire Vengeance Demon Hunter talent tree. There are a lot of other smaller changes for other specs and so on, but as far as tank changes go, that's really the only one of any significance at all. Now, I could go through all of this, but as you can see, it's pretty long. Like I said, this is a comprehensive change. Instead, I'd rather just jump into the game. I mean, I'm still scrolling, good lord. I want to actually jump into the PTR and show off the talent build here. And I'm going to kind of just emphasize some of the more generic things before I get into the specifics. You'll notice that some of these talents here, like Will of the Illidari and Illidari Knowledge, that were previously 2-point talents that would give like 3% magic damage reduction or 3% stamina per point, so 6% for 2 points, have been reduced to 1-pointers that just give 5%. Ultimately, this is a buff because that means you can spend those points elsewhere on other bonuses. And this is really good. I would say that they've done this a lot. There were a lot of filler talents in the middle of the trees, and this is really true on both sides, that they've taken from being 2-point filler talents that were good but expensive, and they've just made them good and cheap. You know, 1-pointers that are just as powerful or around as powerful, but I mean, generally speaking, about twice as powerful per point. So that's pretty good. Additionally, they've just given Sigil of Flame as a baseline talent now for all Demon Hunters, and it put Sigil of Misery in its place, so it's pretty easy to pick up Sigil of Misery now. In general, all of this is coming with the explicit, stated goal of making sigils be a build for Vengeance Demon Hunters, and as it's all currently put together, it looks like it's going to be an amazingly strong build. Now, there were some tweaks down in the bottom of the left-hand tree. As you can see, Elysian Decree is here, and although it's not selected, Fodder to the Flame is also over here in the left-hand tree now. They're no longer a choice node over here in the right-hand tree. And in fact, the bottom of the right-hand tree kind of sucks now, at least for Mythic Plus. It's really quite bad. I think in Raid, you're still going to want to take Soul Crush and Soul Carver for burst damage and just general damage value, but taking Sigil of Chains, that it's actually kind of weird that there is so much value in the middle of the right-hand tree compared to the lower end of it. That's a little strange, but I think the most notable thing here is that previously you were able to get all 3 capstones in the left-hand tree. Right now, and this is a nice little bit of quality of life, if you unspec a point and you're no longer have spent enough points in the upper 2/3 to get to the bottom third, it doesn't brick the tree, it just reds it out and tells you, you have to put in a point. Pretty good quality of life that they put in with this patch. But as you can see, I've spent the minimum number of points in the top 2/3. If I take all the points I have available and I try to get down to the capstones on each one, I can't do that anymore. And that's because Rush of Chaos, which is in the spot that the hunt used to be in, costs 2 points. But this is coming with a baseline 60-second cooldown reduction to Metamorphosis, and then also offers another 60 seconds. So you're getting Metamorphosis on a 2-minute cooldown as opposed to the previous 4-minute cooldown. So it's kind of okay. You're really just losing some damage by not being able to take a Collective Anguish. And I think I can live with that. If we look at a talent tree, I pulled up a Mythic Plus talent tree here, and I'll zoom out a bit. The shape of the trees is very, very different. As you can see, you're coming over all the way to the right side in the right-hand tree in the current PTR estimated setup, and that just was something you never did. You would never come over here and take Sigil of Chains. It's just so expensive and so bad for what it was. But more than that, there's just so many of these 2-point talents like Agonizing Flames, Burning Blood, Will of the Illidari, Illidari Knowledge, where you're just burning, you're just setting your talent points on fire to get these very, I mean, sometimes quite good, but very small or just completely passive bonuses that, you're not really feeling them in the way that you do these talents like the Hunt or Soul Carver. So it's kind of nice to feel like you at least don't have to spend 2 points on all of the passive bonuses throughout the tree. This gives you a lot more flexibility. Like in this talent tree, I've taken Consume Magic, which is something that's really quite hard to be able to afford in a Mythic Plus talent setup in the current 10.1 and even in the 10.0 talent trees. So I think that's pretty good. Just in general, the idea from Blizzard here is that Demon Hunters, Vengeance Demon Hunters, are going to be leaning on their sigils as the source of a lot of their power. It's going to be like a defining aspect of the class identity or the spec identity or however you want to think about it. And I think that's great. I think this is really good because as good as Vengeance Demon Hunter is in the current patch in Season 2, it is heavily propped up by their amazing tier set bonus. They have this Fiery Brand tier set bonus that spreads its massive, basically shield wall onto everything you're tanking, and that's really great. And the problem is that as soon as that bonus goes away, the class is kind of going to be bad again. I don't think it would be terrible, but it would probably be below average, which is not great. It's certainly not great to have a lot of players saying prior to this patch coming in and this update coming in and changing the whole talent structure, a lot of players were saying that they were just going to wear the old tier set bonus even at the expense of giving up like 30 item levels. That is bad. That's really bad. So I think this helps a lot. And just to give a very brief overview of the upcoming talent or tier set bonuses, the 2-piece makes it so that when you attack a target affected by Sigil of Flame, which you're basically able to maintain close to 100% uptime once everything's working correctly, you get a stacking damage, healing, and stamina bonus. It stacks up to 10%, it lasts for 8 seconds, it's pretty easy to maintain. And then the 4-piece bonus makes it so that your Sigil of Flame has a periodic or a chance to flare up and do extra damage, but also create a soul fragment from targets, and it gives you cooldown reduction on your Sigil of Flame, 1 second every 40 Fury you spend. So every time you hit Spirit Bomb, you get a second of cooldown reduction. That's pretty good. You know, it cuts the cooldown from 30 seconds to like 25, 24. But then there are a bunch of other synergistic talents that you're going to be using, like Cycle of Binding, that also reduce your cooldown on sigils. So you're basically going to be able to have like permanent uptime on Sigil of Flame, and that's really good. That adds a lot of damage. So let's actually look at some of these talents now. A lot of the stuff in the upper half of the tree is all the same. Shattered Restoration's now a 1-pointer, but you know, it's just more healing. I mean, Disrupt is Disrupt. Weirdly, Fellblade, and maybe I should talk about this before I get into the rest of it. There are an insane amount of bugs, like one of the most heavily bugged specs I've ever seen in a mid-expansion patch. Right now, Fellblade has no talent cost. There are some other bugs, like if you talent into precise sigils, then your Elysian Decree macros won't work. They will reference the Shadowlands ability instead. That's, I think, a bug on live servers, but still, that hasn't been changed. Okay, interesting. This new amazingly powerful on paper talent, Illuminated Sigils, which gives all your sigil skills a second charge and gives you 20% parry chance against enemies who are affected by Sigil of Flame. So basically just 20% more parry chance. Insane talent. It's just not working at all. Additionally, Immolation Aura, as you can see, is a 30-second cooldown that gives 26 Fury over 9 seconds. That's the Havoc Immolation Aura, and that's just another bug that they'll get around to fixing. Now, because there are so many things that interact with Immolation Aura, this actually bricks your ability to maintain Sigil of Flame uptime. So, like, that's why I'm not including any great, like, testing footage. I really wanted to play this class in raid testing tomorrow/later today, but because it's so insanely bugged right now, not only is it hard to test stuff, I mean, you basically can't. I don't want to play it in Mythic raid testing and have it just be this like unplayable brick. Now, I think that all this stuff is going to get fixed. I think it'll probably get fixed in the next 2 weeks. Certainly hope so. And I will say, prefacing everything, I think the class will be really good once it's all fixed. It certainly looks a lot more interesting and a lot more generically good than it was prior to this change. I think it's going to be a lot more resilient to losing the current amazing 2-piece and 4-piece bonus than it would have been if this change hadn't gone through. All right, now let's actually look at some of these talents. A lot of these things, again, Fury on interrupting, Mastery increasing move speed. This is all normal stuff. Aura of Pain has moved from being connected to Fellblade to coming down here and actually giving some pathing through the tree, so that's fine. You do want to take concentrated sigils or precise sigils now because you're putting so much more of an emphasis on your sigils. You're going to get 2 seconds of uptime or 2 seconds of extra duration on all your sigils from one of these 2 talents. And like I said, right now, precise sigils is still bugged, so it screws with your Elysian Decree. So I prefer it, but I'm using concentrated sigils instead so I can, I don't know, use my abilities. And then you also get 2 seconds of extra uptime on sigils from Chains of Anger over here. So this changes it from your Sigil of Flame and all of your sigils having a 6-second duration to being a 10-second duration, which is quite substantial when Sigil of Flame is a proportionally pretty large amount of your damage output. To also get an extra 66% uptime on it is huge. We're taking Demonic, of course. This is great for pathing and just great for being a talent in the tree. Internal Struggle is a pretty good talent, and then you, like I've mentioned already, you basically have to choose between 2 of the 3 options at the bottom of the tree. You have the Hunt, Elysian Decree, and either Collective Anguish or Fodder to the Flame. Now, as they're all tuned right now, Collective Anguish is the weakest of these 3 for damage in AoE situations. I think it's a little bit better than Elysian Decree in Raid, potentially. So like a Raid setup, which I'll get to in a bit, would probably look more like this. Basically, you would be just swapping from the right side over to the left, something like that. But you want to take the Hunt. It is definitely the talent that offers the most damage, the most priority and burst damage of these 3 options, at least as they're tuned currently. And also getting those 2 points in Rush of Chaos and getting that extra minute of cooldown on your main defensive cooldown is pretty huge. Because you're hitting enemies with sigils so often, Soul Sigils is going to go from being like kind of a moderate niche sigil, or I should say soul fragment generating talent, to something that you're actually going to be getting a lot of soul fragments out of. So it is pretty nice to have. You're not required to have it, but it's pretty good. And the option here down this deep in the tree is really just Erratic Fellheart, which kind of sucks. If you're not going down to get Collective Anguish, Erratic Fellheart is pretty terrible. Now, you don't have to take Darkness, but it's not bad. But you could drop these 2 points here and then just throw them into utility options elsewhere, like Chaos Fragments or Vengeful Retreat, that kind of thing. And one thing I want to touch on in the left-hand tree before I move on is what they've done to Fodder to the Flame. Fodder to the Flame increases your Spectral Sight cooldown from 30 seconds to 60 seconds and makes it reveal a condemned demon. This is how you spawn the demons now. They are not random spawns anymore. Kind of buried the lead on this one, but okay, here we go. I have Spectral Sight, it's on the global cooldown, so I have to hit it, and then boom, there's the demon, and now I can hit it with a glaive and it's dead. And you instantly get the Demon Soul buff for 15 seconds, you instantly get the heal from killing the demon. There isn't a soul placed on the ground. This is Fodder to the Flame now. It's terrible. So I don't think that this talent is going to get used in basically any situation, but I do think in raids that it's very reasonable to assume that you would not run Elysian Decree, and you would probably, if you're really trying to parse, do this. You probably do Flames to the Fury and then take Collective Anguish. In any case, I think that's pretty much enough for the left-hand tree. I think one other thing I wanted to mention here is there is a new talent that really sucks, and that is Live by the Glaive. When you parry or have an attack parried, which you'll never have the latter happen, you're a tank, so when you parry, you restore 2% of your max health and gain 10 Fury. Now, Fury really isn't that valuable of a resource in Mythic Plus in situations where you're being auto-attacked a lot and getting a lot of opportunities to parry. You're never really capped on Fury, or I should say never limited by Fury. You are often capped on Fury. You're limited by your soul fragments. That's really the thing that constrains your ability to use skills. So this sucks for like resource generation. Additionally, it's a 5-second cooldown, so even if you're perfectly proccing the parries on cooldown, which is pretty unlikely, this is like maybe 4,000 healing per second, and that is also terrible. If this got cut down to like a 1 or 2 second cooldown, this is a pretty good talent. If it got cut down to like a 3-second cooldown, I think it probably still wouldn't be very good. But at 5 seconds, this is garbage. Garbaggio. So never gonna get used as it's currently tuned. I mean, I'm sure somebody will spec into it just to do it, but you know, it is a joke talent. We made it bad on purpose as a joke. Okay, now in the right hand tree, you have to come over here to the left side to get Spirit Bomb. This is inevitable whether you're in Raid or in Mythic Plus, and honestly, the talents you take along the way, Frailty, Fracture, they're great. Perfectly Balanced Glaive isn't great, but you know, it's fine. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Calcified Spikes is just a really awesome damage layer that you get as well for coming over here. It's really just so much damage reduction for a single point, and you know, I just really love it a lot. Over on the right-hand side, we have this new talent, Ascending Flame. Sigil of Flame's initial damage is increased by 50%, and multiple applications of Sigil of Flame may overlap. Now, because of all the bugs, because of all the issues with just talents and like Immolation Aura being the wrong one, this isn't something I'm able to test yet and have really any numbers about yet, but on paper, this is going to be pretty significant. You will be able to overlap Sigil of Flame. I mean, for one, you're going to have 2 base charges of Sigil of Flame, so it's going to be pretty easy to just go Sigil of Flame twice in a row, and, you know, like, I was going to show it off, but I literally can't. So yeah, Sigil of Flame, and then pretend that's a second Sigil of Flame, and now you have 2 rolling on enemies. That's pretty nice. But beyond that, you have Charred Flesh down here, which has been changed from just extending Fiery Brand each time your Immolation Aura ticks on enemies to also apply to Sigil of Flame. So you're going to be getting multiple Sigil of Flames overlapping pretty frequently. And that's pretty good. That's a lot of extra damage. Additionally, some of these talents that were 2-pointers have just basically made twice as strong for 1 point. Burning Blood, just twice as strong now. Agonizing Flames, twice as strong now. Extended Spikes, twice as good now. This is all great. Dark Glare Boon, same thing, twice as strong now as it used to be per point. This is amazing. Now, it's really weird that we're not coming down here and getting Last Resort and Soul Carver. You could drop some of these talents, like Extended Spikes, which has really great synergy with Deflecting Spikes. You know, it gives you 2 more seconds on that big parry and armor buff. So it's kind of hard to give that up, but you could drop Dark Glare Boon and Extended Spikes, come down here and take Feed the Demon, second point, and Last Resort. It's an option. I just don't think it'll actually be as consistently good defensively. You could also take some of these talents like Dark Glare Boon, you know, you could drop that and take Void Reaver for 4% more constant damage reduction. I think that's probably worse than the 18 to 20 seconds of cooldown reduction that you get on Fell Devastation, but it is also an option. I wouldn't give up Painbringer. It's just so much damage reduction. It's 10 to 20% damage reduction all the time. I wouldn't give up Calcified Spikes. That's like 6 to 8% damage reduction on average. And it's so good that it, like, when Demon Spikes falls off, you immediately get the biggest version of it, 12% damage reduction. Like, that's so nice that it gives you the most value when you need it the most. What a well-designed talent. The one real stinker in this tree is Revel in Pain. Now, Revel in Pain is really good in the current situation, in the current state of Demon Hunter, because you're getting Fiery Brands applied so often and they're falling off so often that you're getting a lot of charges of this shield, like a lot of procs of it. But in the new version of the class, in the 10.2 version of the class, you're getting this effect at most once a minute. It's a 116,000 damage shield. Maybe you're getting it even less than that. You know, you might not be casting your shield wall on cooldown. You might be casting it like every minute and 15 seconds. Well, that makes this even worse. So it's pretty annoying that you have to talent into this real stinker of a talent here. But you do to be able to path down to Chains of Anger, which is this huge damage increase and just a huge utility increase as well. Like, that is probably the thing that I haven't really emphasized yet in all of this. You get 10 seconds of uptime on Sigil of Silence for each cast. You have 2 charges of it now, and you get a bunch of cooldown reduction on it thanks to Cycle of Binding. Every time you hit an enemy with a Sigil, you get 3 seconds of Sigil cooldown reduction. Since your Sigil of Flame cooldown is going to be so heavily reduced, you know, it's going to be quite a bit lower than the baseline 30 seconds. For one, you're getting cooldown reduction from like casting Sigil of Silence or Sigil of Misery. You're also just getting cooldown reduction by pressing Spirit Bomb thanks to your tier set bonus. You might be shaving like 10, 15 seconds off the cooldown of Sigil of Silence, realistically. And that's pretty amazing. Like, Vengeance Demon Hunters are going to be kind of rivaling Pallies. So they'll have a very different execution, but they're kind of going to be rivaling Pallies for their ability to just banish caster mobs into the Nether Realm. I still think that Burning Alive and Fiery Demise are going to be worth taking. Like, they're just such a great source of damage increase. Fiery Demise is just such a huge damage increase while it's active. And Burning Alive really makes your Fiery Brand go from being, you know, a whatever, basically a single target damage reduction cooldown that doesn't really have that great of uptime to being a pretty amazing group damage reduction cooldown. And on a 1 minute cooldown, you're able to get, you know, basically one use every large enemy pack, and that's pretty great. So I do still think that these 3 points right here are going to be worth using. Maybe there is some other option that would justify dropping these 3 points, but the problem is I just don't know where you would go with that, with those points. Maybe you come down here and you take Soul Carver in Last Resort. I just think that's worse. I think that's so much weaker defensively, and I know it's weaker offensively. So I really think that this is still going to be the standard setup, except instead of taking Down in Flames, where you get a lot more Fiery Brand availability, because you're not getting all the extra free Fiery Brand procs from your tier set bonus, instead you're getting a bunch of juice onto your sigils, you really want to maximize that with Illuminated Sigils. It's just such a huge damage increase, and 20% parry on enemies that are affected by Sigil of Flame. In Mythic Plus, in AoE tanking, that's insane. Even in Raid, 20% more parry is pretty insane. You know, we're talking about, like, major defensive cooldowns for Blood DK, Dancing Rune Weapon, like, that level of defensive value, except it's just up all the time. This is really good. Now let's take a look at a Raid build here, and I think this is slightly different, because obviously I have spec'd basically just out of a lot of the more defensive talents like Painbringer and Calcified Spikes and Extended Spikes. A lot of the more auto attack oriented stuff you drop in the right hand tree. And Elysian Decree is not as good for single target damage as Collective Anguish. That really is the difference there. Now this is all subject to sims. It might wind up being the case that once sims are functioning and you're able to test stuff correctly and you're playing around with the cooldown reduction that you're getting out of Cycle of Binding and so on, that Elysian Decree actually winds up being available often enough that it is good and worth using. I would say that even if they're like very, very close on damage, I probably still wouldn't use Elysian Decree, because in single target I would be using Soul Carver, and there's just only so many keybinds that you can fit in to, an action bar, and so many on the global cooldown abilities that you can cast in a span of time. So if you have an option of 2 abilities, and one of them is just passive extra damage tacked onto something else, and the other one is an active skill that you have to like dedicate thought and a GCD to, I'd rather have the passive one most of the time. Now, generally speaking, in the left-hand tree, things are going to look pretty similar, though. You know, I like taking Darkness for Raid. It is pretty nice to have that Raid defensive cooldown. Again, you're still not taking Fellblade. It's still basically, it's just rotational bloat. And some of these talents really aren't that great, but it's like, okay, I don't really want Sigil of Misery cooldown reduction in Raid, but I don't really need Imprison or Consume Magic in Raid either, so I'll just take some stupid filler garbage to get further down the tree, I guess. It is what it is. But in the right-hand tree, you are definitely going to want to take Soul Crush in Raid. Just the ability to get all the different effects of Frailty stacked up. I mean, for one, 4% more damage per stack. That's 12 to 20% more damage on average, and it gives you the ability to stack up like 8 or 10 stacks and then hit Soul Carver and have it hit for 30 to 40% more damage. That's pretty good. And, even just in general, like, this is such a huge damage talent. It's so good. It also gives you a lot of damage reduction, though, with talents like Void Reaver, giving you, again, 4% damage reduction per stack of Frailty. So if you're averaging 3 to 5, that's 12 to 20% damage reduction. Pretty good. And then 10% Leech per stack, so 30 to 50% Leech. Also pretty good. Other than that, a lot of the stuff stays the same. You know, you're not as concerned about auto attacks and raids, so you're not worrying about extended spikes. You're not taking fallout in a single target raid situation because, I mean, generating one soul fragment from immolation aura just isn't that great. You could technically take soul sigils instead of darkness if you wanted to be selfish. Like, I don't really mind that at all. Conceptually, I think that makes a lot of sense. But, you know, always be prepared to take darkness instead. I really don't care for Roaring Fire all that much, and since you don't need it to path down the tree now that you're going over to the right side to get Ascending Flame, that's, you know, that pretty much clears everything else up. And yeah, I think this all looks pretty good. You're taking Soul Carver, you're taking Soul Crush, you're maximizing your damage in raid. It really does look pretty similar to the way that you're set up for raid right now, where you have a tree that's kind of going around the outside. But you have a lot more freedom. You've had a lot of talents like Burning Blood and Agonizing Flames that used to cost 2 points and now only cost 1. You haven't lost any power at all. You've basically only gained power, and that's good. They've basically just shifted a lot of the power that was in the current tier set into the class, but done it in a way where it plays and looks and feels very different, and that's pretty cool. I think this is going to just be a generally a lot more effective version of the class. And I think if I had anything else to really like nail down on, I'm impressed that they did this by not just reusing a lot of the ideas from Legion, BFA, and Shadowlands. This is something new. This is a new spec, a new version of Vengeance Demon Hunter. It's pretty cool on paper. I really do look forward to being able to actually play it, but the little bit of dabbling on training dummies and kind of saying, okay, I know that what this will feel like, even though it's not working correctly right now. I'm a huge fan. I think this is going to be rad, and despite all the criticism that people have had of the tier set bonus, I actually think it's going to be okay because of all these changes that have happened. Basically, they exceeded my expectations and did so in a way that was really clever and not just a rehash of old ideas, which is pretty cool. Man, they're really doing a good job with this expansion. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.